Wisconsin can be so cold. The scales of justice can erode. If we accept lies big and bold. We forget we live on Avery Road.
Hello everybody, this is Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases, but also as time passes I've been covering other cases such as the Staircase or OJ and many wrongful convictions of youth. I go over the documents, the photos, the videos, anything case related. So stay tuned, because I have many more videos, just like the one you're about to see. Hey, by the way, Laura, I want to upload a portion of this. Is that fine with you?
If what?
I want to upload a portion of this on my channel. Is that fine with you?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Allie can too if she wants.
I'll work out the royalties.
And you guys also have the permission to do that from my channel. If we do a hangout on my channel, you also have permission to do so.
Absolutely. I wouldn't even think twice.
I just figured Google might try to get involved when I upload it, so I just wanted to go ahead and have your permission on the video so that I could point them to that.
So Gary's jury pool, pretty much the entire state, was so polluted that he was never going to get a fair trial. But here's what I say, let's put that aside for a second. So, that was appealed in state court and he lost. You have these elected people that went to law school and passed the bar and they keep getting reelected. Then you go over to the federal system and you have somebody who's given a lifetime appointment, a magistrate, and he determines, no, this thing was coerced. Not only did he determine it was coerced, what was it, 97-page opinion or something? A very lengthy opinion.
Yeah, 91 pages, yeah.
There you go. Detailing, why it was. And then, we go to the Seventh Circuit and they had 7 judges at the time that decided to hear it, and it comes down 4-3. So my point on this is, while I agree with everybody who feels strongly that Brendan didn't get justice, that his rights were violated, all of it, very strongly. You have 4 people who were appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the U.S. Senate that felt that it wasn't coercive under current Supreme Court case law, and 3 that felt just as, I don't know if y'all read those dissents from the Seventh Circuit. There was 2.
I got some
Wood's dissent doesn't mince words, but my point being, Laura, and I don't mean to sidetrack Stephen Avery. Obviously, that's just as important. But my point is that reasonable, intelligent people can differ even on something that is clear-cut as the confession being coerced.
Right.
And so, I believe anybody who's rational, intelligent, can speak calmly to state their position, ask questions, should be in your channel. And I'm glad you invited people like Gary. I hope it's okay if I call you Gary Falcon. But when I'm on camera, I tend to like to use people's real names. I understand there's a few on here we can't because of prior problems, but reasonable minds can differ. And I think it's important for all of us that are on our side to understand what the reasonable viewpoints or the reasonable questions are on the other. That's all I have to say on that.
I agree.
I 100% agree.
But I want to just go back to.
I even like the way Travis says it better than I do.
I just want to go back to something that was said before Travis started speaking. C4P 420. Gary is Falcon. I don't know if either one of them are guilty or innocent, and I don't care, because I know that neither one of them got a fair trial, and I know that neither one of them got a trial with decent lawyers that showed evidence, with a non-corrupt DA, with a non-corrupt jury. So personally, to me, I don't care if they're guilty or not. I never got personal. Some of you guys, I won't mention names, Ali Ericos, got personal with the families, with I stayed far away from them. I don't care about them. I care that the injustice that was done to them should have never been done. The fact that Brendan, do I believe he may have seen something? Absolutely. Do I think he's involved in the murder? Absolutely not. But to me, it's not a personal thing. Like, I don't equate it to my children. I equate it to, God, this guy, his trial was ridiculous. He's sitting in 11 years so they can fuck Avery. That whole dichotomy is just wrong. Like, everything is just wrong about it. That's where I stand. That's where I have the problem. I never got personal with the families. Well, I maybe fought with them, but I never got personal with them for that reason. Because once you cross that line of personal, everything changes. And your views get skewed, your evidence gets skewed, because it's like a friend. Now you have a friend that you're sticking up for instead of the injustice. Like that, but that's where I've always stood that.
Yeah, one friend's in my
I think it's this way with every true crime case that, for whatever reason, it might be because you have a child about the same age as Brendan, and it really rubs you the wrong way, or maybe somebody from the other side has a family member that was a victim of a similar crime, and so. But I think every true crime type of case, West Memphis 3 or whatever it is, that it pulls you in, and so it's human nature to take a position and stand behind it. That's just the way we are in this country because of our political system. It's why we don't discuss politics at Thanksgiving, because we know how that can turn out, and typically. It takes impassioned people to form a movement, and then to create movement and start momentum. But I don't mean to cut anybody else off, but Gary, when we get around to it on questions, if you have any questions about the legal aspects of things that remain unanswered in your mind, when we get to that point, I'll try and answer those questions for you if you have any.
No, I mean, as far as questions go, no. I was going to say something. It's funny. All this talk about Dassey made me think of something that we kind of, I don't know if we touched on it last week, but I kind of feel about Dassey the way I feel about that gypsy kid. That even if he is guilty, even if he is absolutely, his story is true and everything, that I think he got kind of influenced by Stephen Avery, and I almost kind of feel like there's extenuating circumstances in that event. I almost wouldn't feel bad if he got let off, just because if he got released, just because I think he was really afraid of his uncle, and I think he got kind of pressured into this in a way, and I don't think he would have done something like this, assuming he's guilty at all. But I don't think he would have done something like this on his own. I think Avery kind of pushed him into it, and I kind of feel, in a way, I kind of feel bad for that kid. But coerced or not, I mean, if even if I were to stipulate that he was coerced, if Dassey during his confession brings up things that the police theretofore did not know, then to me that indicates that he's being truthful, and that he does know something, and whatever methods the cops use to get it out of him, to get it out of his brain, however questionable, doesn't really assuage or change the fact that he knows something about what happened, and he was there essentially. But that's kind of where I am on the whole Dassey question. It's like, I mean, I'm kind of assy about Dassey. It's like, I think even if he did do it, I'm kind of like, you know, I mean, I wouldn't mind it so much if he got released, let's just say. Avery, though, no. I think Avery absolutely did it. And, you know, like I said, I know I'm going to say this about 100 times, but I think he belongs right where he is. And there's no question in my mind about that at all.
Why?
Because I don't believe that the cops planted evidence as you do. I don't believe that you can get someone's DNA on things and blood on other things unless you were there to plant it there. And as far as the believability of Manitowoc or any, you know, the cops doing that kind of a frame up, my threshold default is set at 0 on that. I don't think it's possible. I think it's possible in an anything is possible sense of the word. It's possible that they did it, but I think it's so unlikely so as to render it just 0% in my mind, almost 0% that's what happened.
So
and
what about somebody else planning?
There's even
Like
less.
the real killer.
Somebody else planted it. Who had access to? Yeah, who had access to non-EDTA tainted blood? I mean, unless you're going to believe his story about the blood being left in the sink, which
What do you mean believe his story? That's fact. That's a fact.
What?
That's a fact. That's not like a made-up story. That's a
Well,
fact.
I don't know that's fact. What we know is he started saying that immediately to his attorneys.
And on
There
the
was
news.
blood in the sink and it was cleaned up. And we know that Zellner and her law clerk went in and removed the sink. But when we say fact, and so Zellner's theory, and what Zellner didn't state that as fact in her brief. She said that could easily and clearly be the possible source that someone who planted blood evidence, that would be the logical source for it, because he maintained that from the beginning, before there was any time to make anything up, before there was any revelation about blood being in the RAV4, how it was found. And you see Weigert ask him in that first video, pre-arrest, well, you know, how did your blood get in there? And Stephen logically thought, you know, the Manitowoc set him up the first time, and all of the same characters are involved. Coburn, Link, and that nutty sheriff. And so I think it was logical for him to point the finger at the sheriff's office. What's evolved over time, I think, is Catherine Zellner has figured out, well, that doesn't fit with these other facts that I've established with reliable, credible experts, but this does fit. It was almost as if she was saying, you know, why didn't I catch this earlier? And in her most recent Twitter press conference, whatever you want to call it, she indicated L.E. did not plant the blood, the killer did. And so to answer your question, Gary, in her brief, and what she's arguing is that She has not excluded the ex-boyfriend. What's his name? Hilgis?
Ryan.
Ryan. And has not excluded him as a Denny suspect. And that, there were two people on that property that would have had access to the RAV4. And that when you take that, so I don't think it's a fact that there was blood found in the sink. That's been his position from the very beginning. And if that, what Zellner's arguing, if that is accepted as true, taken in conjunction with her experts, that would fit a theory of planting of evidence. But and it's easy to get confused in all of this, but the original theory was it was law enforcement that planted it. That was clearly the theory at trial. That has evolved since she took over the case, got the experts involved. They were able to look at this evidence. Her theory has evolved as her experts have reported back to her, what their opinions are to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
Right. That's why I just want to see all this stuff get argued out in an evidentiary hearing. That's, I want both sides in a courtroom arguing about it. And the fact that that's not happening, it only suggests even further to me that there is trouble in Manitowoc and in Wisconsin.
It is troubling. They should have an evidentiary hearing. They look good lawyers on both sides, cross-examine each other's experts. It's still a very difficult standard that they would have to overcome, and let the chips fall where they may. And if the judge says, no, I'm sorry, I just don't see enough for a new trial, well, that's it. But legally, I think she's raised enough on enough issues that she should be given an evidentiary hearing on at least three of the issues. I think are clear cut, and then more maybe beyond that. But
which three issues are those?
That's just a whole long lengthy answer.
Okay,
but
we'll do that
we'll
save that for my video.
But
save that for my hangout.
Yeah, well, but obviously the blood DNA.
Yeah.
The burning of the bodies. It's the ones you guys talk about all the time in support of your all's positions.
Right. The bones and the.
But what gets skipped over is someone asked earlier, and I can't see the chat now that I'm in the conversation, but someone asked earlier in the chat, what expert testified about the blood? And it's true, at the trial, there was only one expert, and that was the state. That's part of Zellner's criticism of Stevens' trial counsel, is they didn't have a blood spatter expert. But now there is testimony, sworn testimony before the court in the form of an affidavit. And
she had a blood splatter expert on the show.
Travis, hang on one second. Allie wanted to answer. Hold on. Guys, hold on a second. Allie wanted to answer Ben. Allie, go.
Ben was asking in chat if Teresa had said that she was afraid of Steven. And that's one of the things that Kratz has been claiming all over the place. Anywhere that'll put a microphone in his face, he'll say that. That's one of the things he says all the time, is that she was afraid of him. She was creeped out by him. But that actually was not something that Teresa said ever. That was Kathy Williford, the lady that had Teresa's route before Teresa took it over. She's the one, she went out and saw Steven one time, and she said that he creeped her out because of some, because he had to go inside for a long period of time and fill out the paper with all the car information. And he asked her in, and she, said, no, I'll sit in the car. But she said that she was really creeped out by that, which didn't make sense. But she's actually the one that said that. It wasn't Teresa. Teresa actually thought Steve was a nice guy. And if you look at her chat conversation that she had with some guy online on like some chat room. She actually says that he's a nice guy, and her friends are the ones that have a problem with him.
Yep.
So
That's the biggest cat I've ever seen in my life.
Mine?
Yes.
Oh, it's behind you.
Well, come here. Well, come here. He's kind of big.
And Simon, to answer your question, that to the guilters, I'm not a guilter, but I can tell you that the reason why the sheriff threatened Manitowoc coroner is because of the lawsuit. That they didn't want her to go there because of the lawsuit. I don't buy it. I think it's a crock of shit, but that's what guilters will tell you.
Just so you know, this is Draven. He has been starring in my videos like since he was a kitten. But yeah, he's kind of big now. He doesn't like me very much anymore. So he just chills in the background now.
Does he like ask you to drop him off like a block away from wherever it is that, you know, it's like, you can just drop me off here?
Ben, just so you know, Kratz has a worse background than Steven did. I know you're not going to believe it, but it's fact. Ken Kratz is a more despicable person than Steven is.
Also, Ben, I openly acknowledged already that Steven is no Boy Scout. Certainly no Boy Scout.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm gonna, you know, I'll probably bring that up to him sometime if that's what he still thinks. To Greaseback, actually, if he still believes that. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, there's.
I now know Beans. You're busted.
I mean, like I think we've all done it. You know, the whole list of Ken Kratz's, all the things that make him murder left out. If we only knew, you know, these are the things that the jury convicted him on, and if we had known that, we would have different opinions. And he lists this whole thing and sends it to all the media everywhere, and in emails. And like just in Making a Murderer 2, I think we finally got to see that whole email that he sent everywhere. And, you know, we've seen the list before, and of course we've all debunked every single thing he said that wasn't speculation. Like, if it can be proven, we've already proven all of that was just bullshit. It was a lie. Like the one example with Teresa saying she was creeped out by him. Just didn't happen.
Right.
Hey, Ben, hold on one second.
No,
Ben, let me tell you something. I have been studying Kratz for 3 years. Did he pull a gun on somebody? No, he did not. Did he go to jail for 6 years? No, but he should have been locked away and thrown away and key thrown away. He did 10 times worse because he took a domestic violence victim and sexualized her and sexually harassed her and he is a deplorable fucking human being. And maybe because you're not female, you don't get it. But what he did to a woman who went to him for trust, he is 10 times worse than anything Steven has ever done. Don't even get me started.
And the girl that that says that he forced himself on her and stuff, that's actual harm, Ben. That is actual harm. When you point a gun at someone, it doesn't actually hurt them unless you pull the trigger, which Steven didn't shoot his cousin, so there's no actual harm. There's just a perception of fear, and that's it. But with Ken Kratz's potential victims, there was a lot more than that, and there was actual harm. So I'm not sure what you were trying to say with that little analogy or comparison. That was a really bad one, really.
You mean other than threatening to kill someone?
But no actual harm takes place.
Falcon, he took this woman was beat by her boyfriend. She was destroyed. She went to the DA for help, and this motherfucker is sexting her and trying to take advantage of her. It doesn't get worse than that. And then Steven Avery, we can all say, guilters can say whatever they want about him. He has never been officially diagnosed as a narcissist or a psychopath. But guess what? Steven Avery Ken Kratz has. Ken Kratz is a diagnosed narcissist by his own fucking psychologist. He is worthless fucking worthless. He took advantage of people in his office. He took advantage of victims. He is a deplorable fucking human being who should be locked up.
As
I'm not even going to argue with you on that one. It's like, I'm not even going to argue with it. Anything you say about Kratz, because I don't know anything about that, and that's fine. I'm just saying, it's like, I'm talking about what Avery did, and people are saying like that pointing a gun at someone and brandishing it like that, and in effect threatening to kill them does not constitute any actual harm.
And Stephen did 10 years for that, Falcon.
Would beg a differ on that one.
But Stephen Stephen 10 years of Stephen's original, or 8 years of Stephen's original sentence was served for that crime. Stephen
But
paid,
hold on.
Hey, wait, I got something else to say. Stephen paid the piper. Stephen paid the piper for his crime.
Dick, no,
but
he admitted
Kratz,
it too.
Kratz has sidestepped any punishment or responsibility for his.
Well, I'm not defending Kratz at all. It's like, don't get me wrong. I'm not defending. I'm not trying to apologize for Kratz or defend
just that the fact that it's okay when certain people do it, but if we don't like Mr. Avery, it's the obvious picking and choosing and whatever of who gets prosecuted for what around there. It's crazy.
Let me tell you something. They find a girl winds up dead at Kratz's house, and they find his DNA here and her blood there. And you give me all this stuff about what he did. I'm going to say that I think Kratz.
We weren't talking about the murder conviction. We were talking about pointing the gun and Kratz's antics with the domestic violence victims. But go ahead.
I'm just saying, it's like I don't want you to get me wrong. I'm not trying to defend anything you guys are saying about Kratz and Lease. It's like, I'm just saying, it's like, you're talking about, and I'm seeing it in the chat, like how someone's past behavior relates maybe to something they're getting accused of now. And I think there's something to that. I mean, but I don't know where people are going with relation to Kratz and the horrible things he's done. It's like, I'm going to tell you. I
get very fucking irate when it comes to Ken Kratz. So know it now. So I apologize. I apologize for interrupting, and I apologize for not letting you finish out. I really, let me put that up front. I apologize. But this motherfucker gets under my skin like you have no idea. First of all, a narcissist has zero conscience. They don't give a fuck about what they do. They don't care who they hurt. It's all about them and how good they're going to look and what you can do for them. So you take that and you put that in a fucking DA, what he's capable of is endless. He's not dumb. He's an educated guy. So you have an educated guy who is shut up, mama. You have an educated guy who's dangerous. And why is he dangerous? Because he doesn't give a fuck about anybody else's feelings. He doesn't care who he hurts. And understand, I'm not making this shit up. There is proof that he was, by his own lawyers, like his own lawyer psychologist, that he is a diagnosed narcissist. He is the biggest pond scum ever invented, ever born. Any true narcissist is. So when you take a true narcissist and you give them power, it's endless what they're going to end up doing. It's just endless. And it's absolutely so frustrating to me when people don't see. They'll say, oh, Stephen Avery's this or Stephen Avery's that. Stephen Avery is a loser. There's no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that he committed murder. And people don't know how to separate the two because Stephen's pond scum from, a low-life family. But when it comes to Ken Kratz, because he's educated, can't say he's good-looking because he's certainly not, or has a sexy voice because he certainly doesn't. But when you have people don't want to see what Ken Kratz is and what he's capable of because he is a narcissist. So it goes back to wealth. And I'm not saying Ken's wealthy because he's not, but it goes back to education and class. And it's really not fair if you can say that Stephen Avery belongs in jail when the person that put him there, I know you're going to say, well, he put himself there. No, he didn't. Just like he didn't the first 18 years. The person that put him there is a diagnosed narcissist that doesn't give a fuck about anybody except how he looks. This is proven. This is not me making up a theory. This is proven. And it frustrates the fuck out of me when people can say, well, Ken Kratz didn't go to jail. Well, you know what? He should be in jail. He deserves to be in jail. So I apologize. I get so irate over it.
That's not even what I'm saying. I'm saying it's like you speak as though Avery wouldn't be in jail if it wasn't for Ken Kratz. And it's like, and I disagree with that completely. It's like there's a lot of things that put there's this. The evidence against Avery was what put him in jail, not Ken Kratz. I mean,
wrong.
Well,
Ken Kratz lied. Ken Kratz created fucking evidence. Ken Kratz.
There was two lawyers at that trial.
He was on site.
There was two prosecutors. I agree with you, and that's what's hard about this case is there's fundamental factors like Ken Kratz and Lynn, whatever his name is, they're just so infuriating. But the fact of the matter is, two attorneys tried that case for both sides. Fallon was the co-counsel. Fallon's still on the case. No one's accusing Fallon of being a narcissist. And, Kratz, because he's a narcissist, has kept himself in the public eye. We saw those press conferences he gave, even after he had been disbarred temporarily, suspended for 4 months, and just humiliated. And he comes back and gives these little press conferences. And I understand, Laura, what your frustration and anger, but the fact of the matter is there were two lawyers that tried that for the state. And I think, Gary, you make a point that, despite Kratz, given the judge, and although, Laura, now I have to, just thinking of this, I have to agree with you. Even Kratz admits now that he went too far in that one press conference. And the trial judge, Willis, even felt that he'd gone too far in that press conference. The famous one, if you're under 15 years of age, yada, yada. And just infuriating. We've all read what the ethics professor said about those comments, and he's from that college right down the road from where you used to live, Pace University, good law school. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you're familiar with it, Laura. I just can't remember the name of that law school the ethics professor's from. Pace or Pierce, or anyway, so there, while I think, given that judge, that if Kratz wasn't on the case, we'd probably still be where we were, but it's part of the overall picture of unfairness,
and impropriety,
a deprivation of rights that are fundamental. It's so funny. We're taught from kindergarten to salute the flag, and it's a symbol of, liberty and our constitutional protections. But for some reason, when you get into criminal court and it's a violent crime, everybody, the jurors and the judge, everybody all of a sudden feels that the presumption of innocence isn't as important in other types of cases. And this is where you always end up if a jury doesn't truly believe in their heart of hearts that the defendant is not guilty unless and until the state proves he's guilty. You always end up here. Fortunately, 95 to 98% of the time, juries get it right. But I understand the frustration with Kratz, but the reality is 2 attorneys were at that trial, and one, Fallon, remains the one that's dealing with Zellner. But I prefer to hear Laura's description of Ken Kratz. I really wish I had that recorded. That was really, really good.
Oh, I've
way,
gone
Laura,
off many of them.
I kind of cut you and Laura off. I know, Gary, you were arguing that another attorney, we know where Laura stands on Ken Kratz.
I can't deal with narcissists like that.
And it would be like, you say, hey, we want the evidence from the Dassey computer, and they pull up with a semi-trailer with hundreds of boxes of paper.
Right.
And there's one box in there buried that's got all of the search terms and the, deviant sexual photos and mutilated bodies and so on. And so in that one box, out of, of course, it's digital evidence. So,
Right.
I mean, if this stuff was printed out, I don't think
Right.
I'd be off base. You're talking, one box out of 500.
Solid.
So, it's dirty tricks in my view. Now, so what happened legally with this is that Zellner, got a hold of this and said, wait a minute, this is Brady. This is a Brady violation. You should have pointed this out to the defense attorneys at the time, because this would have got them past Denny and been able to shoot right at Bobby, which they were precluded from doing,
Right.
but, at trial. So, and Brady, the significance of a Brady violation is it is automatic grounds for a new trial.
Right.
No evidentiary hearing is needed. Might need an evidentiary hearing on, when was this stuff turned over? But I don't think there's any dispute about it. They had the letter. Here it is. Here's the disc. Here's the report. And her argument, I thought a good one was, look, they did turn everything over, but they put this misleading thing. And I don't know if you remember in MAM1, but or MAM2, they're talking about the volume of documents.
Yes.
And what they had to review was significantly more than what's available online. And all of you have spent hours and hours and hours. I mean, they put a ton of time pouring through documents. And the reality is, in a perfect world, you go through every single document one by one. You analyze everything. You listen to every audio, whether it's a 10-hour confession or 3 days of 5 hour, you listen to every audio, look at every DVD. But in a perfect world, sometimes you just can't do that. And so she filed the Brady motion. That went to our favorite judge, who just ran unopposed last year and got a 6-year new term.
Who?
Sukowicz?
Whatever her name is, bitch from hell.
Angela Sukowicz.
Who? Judge, the one that's on now that keeps denying her?
Right. It went to her.
Asshole.
She said, no, I'm not giving you anything on it. They took that up to the Court of Appeals in Wisconsin, and they said, well, no, wait a minute. You at least need to let them be heard on this issue. Sent it back to her. And then, unfortunately, she ruled kind of the way I suspected she was, which is that, well, look, they sent it all to you. It may not have been in the best form to your liking, but you had it all. You had all 500 boxes. You just didn't bother to dig through them. And that's essentially what a ruling was. And now it's up on appeal. So what do I feel about it? I think exactly how you characterize it, Eric Jose, is dirty tricks. And
what is the likelihood you think of or at least what do you think the chances are that the appeals court might see that as a dirty trick? Say, obviously, but I mean, roughly speaking, like from what you've seen in the past and stuff or something.
What I've seen in the past, it's like, what I've seen in the past is they had a clearly coerced confession from a 16-year-old child with mental deficits.
Yeah.
And they said that wasn't a coerced confession. So, and
right.
Basically
saying that the mosaic gets built one little piece of rock at a time, and that's one of the pieces.
Right. And what I've said in the past is that there's three components to this. There's the legal component, and there's a grassroots public component, which all of you are a part of. And then there's a political component. And I don't know how strong the political component is. We do know that the governor was unseated, and a new governor is in there. He's probably going to be more sympathetic to criminal defense issues and juvenile confessions. The AG, what's his name? Schimmel?
Yes. Yeah. Well, now it's Josh Rowell, but.
Well, Schimmel was unseated. And so we got a new AG. Might be more, you get these change in regimes, like Dallas County. There was a big change in the DA regime, and they assigned an innocence department. Austin got a new DA a couple of years ago, and they followed that model. A prosecutor's appointed to review cases to see if there might be
CUIs.
Pardon?
Are you talking about CUIs?
Yes.
Conviction integrity or CIUs, conviction integrity units. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
And so, there may be a change that way, but unless the only reason I know this is, I just saw it happen in the West Memphis 3 case. And, there's got to be some political pressure because all of these are elected positions in Wisconsin that there's, if there's some recourse, if there's some public outcry. But no, I think it was dirty pool, dirty tricks. And, I unfortunately, because of the way that judge had ruled in the past, there was some case law that gave her an opening to say, well, they dropped off the semi-trailer. There's doesn't matter that the summary that they gave you said, you don't need to bother looking. One question I'd like to ask Allie, I've asked Eric Jose and other, because you've been back there, Allie. I'm trying to get a better sense for what the people in that area, Manitowoc County, are like. We get a very, understandably, from the part 1 and part 2 of MAM, we get a very small slice. We only get like some of the key players, Avery and his family, a couple of extended family members, and then we get the legal teams and the prosecutors, and there's a few clips, in that bar where Chuck's playing pool. There was actually some people who were sympathetic at the time, but I still don't have an understanding of what a slice of life is like out there. What what the people are like, and I'd be interested to hear what you came away with.
I really didn't get to talk to a whole lot of people. I just, aside from like the family and the visits I had out there with, like on the Avery property, and then, you know, like visiting with Sandy and stuff. But I did go to one of the rallies and I did talk to several people that were there that I didn't know. One of them especially was very, very much a guilter. And when I walked up to the rally, the first thing I saw was this guy being surrounded by all of us and getting yelled at from every direction, just screaming. And he's just standing there like, you know, and I felt so bad. Like I actually just like walked up and pulled him away. I was like, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And you know, I just wanted to know, like, why do you believe what you believe? Why do you believe that they're guilty? And he told me that he believes in the police. He doesn't believe that they're corrupt or whatever, and that he believes that all the things in the news were true. And he had never watched Making a Murderer. He had never looked into any of the evidence online at all, because he felt like, I think a lot of the people, the locals, might feel there that it's disrespectful to the family, to Teresa, to even question whether they're innocent or guilty. So I think a lot of the locals, especially the older people who just watch the news and they would never go online and look at things for themselves, they probably won't change their opinions. But I think a lot of the, you know, the younger people who like Netflix and chill all the time or whatever, they probably have at least raised some questions. And I know there are a lot of locals that you know, have changed their opinion all along. Up until Making a Murderer, they believed everything that they saw on the news and heard on the news and was in the papers. But
In fact,
yeah,
I had
so
an opposite experience to Allie there. She walked up seeing Gilter getting kind of, you know, by supporters who were less than compassionate, right? Well,
yeah,
when I was
very
there
emotional.
this year in 2018, I was standing there talking to, this was the oddest thing about it. I was standing there, a priest had come out. He usually talks with the prisoners there because the jailhouse is right there next to the courthouse and stuff. And so he spends his time working there with the, so he had come out and was checking out our little rally and everything. And so I'm talking to this priest and he's asking me about the case and I'm explaining to him about Brendan and blah, blah, you know, da, da, da. Suddenly there's this lady that she looks like she's, you know, I don't know, maybe 60 or so, really skinny, not really dressed very well, and she is just screaming and yelling at us and like startled me and the priest that I was talking to because of the way she came up on us. And you know, I was in the middle of saying something and then she was like like screeching, and him and I both look and it's like, whoa. And you know, the supporters that year, I mean, everybody just walked up to her and said, look, you know, sorry, you know, if you don't understand or believe what we're saying, but we happen to believe the way we do. And she eventually went away, but she was like screeching for about probably 10 to 15 minutes. Even the priest guy was kind of looking like, just like, whoa, you know, like he was a little bit like crazy, you know, thought it was crazy. But I will say, to affirm what Allie's saying about the youth, the Netflix and chill generation there, I think there's something to that, because I had two different couples while I was there that sought me out, came and sought me out at my hotel and at the rally to come and express their support for Stephen and Brendan and stuff. So there is some changing in the state there, but it's happening with the youth as opposed to, I think, the adults. But I think even some of the adults are starting to question after MAM2. I think whether or not they're willing to go, yeah, okay, Stephen's innocent, or whether he deserves a new trial, I think even the staunchest of supporters are going, well, maybe there is a little bit of room for doubt here. Just because the evidence is just so bizarre and the things that she's found. The Hoodlatch DNA is, for me, a dead giveaway of kind of what's wrong here, especially when we know that there was swabs collected that got thrown away. Wink, wink, right? So it's just so many oddities in this case, so much impropriety, and the state just wants to go, nothing to see here. We couldn't have possibly done anything. There's no reason to think. Yeah, there's plenty of reason to think, and that's the problem here. That's what pisses me off about it even more than King Kratz.
So, Gary, I don't know if you're familiar. So, what Zellner's theory is on that, it's really quite interesting. You read her brief just on this particular issue, is it brought Stephen Avery in on a warrant to, brought him down to a hospital where evidence tech was to collect DNA swabs and whatnot, and they did the normal buccal swabs in the mouth and whatnot, and collected other types of evidence that was in the order, and then they also collected these famous groin swabs. I like Laura's description. They wiped his balls, but the groin swabs. And then the officer said, wait a minute. The order doesn't allow swabbing of the balls. And he claims that he took those swabs and put them over into a sharps container. You all know what those are. It's you put sharp objects like hypodermic needles and whatnot.
Right. We call it, I see them as biohazard containers.
Yes, yeah. Yes. So, and she's arguing that was the source of the
hood latch
a possible source that should have been argued at trial that wasn't. That was a source for the hood latch DNA. That's an example of an argument where
I also believe in her original petition for post-conviction relief, she proved that the buccal swabs and the hood latch DNA swabs were traveling together on the way to the crime lab. I believe that was in her original petition, by the way.
Yeah, so you know it's this case it's like an onion. So you got this, you peel that thin layer of skin off that you can never get rid of in the garbage disposal, but right. After you peel that one off, you got this thick outer layer of onion, and that's her bones are found on the property. There's her blood and his blood in her car. There's the key to her car in his bedroom with her DNA on it. That's a pretty simple case. Should have taken a week and the jury should have been out an hour. But then you peel that layer off, and then you got, this onion's the size of a house. You got this prior history with Link and Colburn. You got a pending civil case. You got the same guys doing searches when they said, oh, we're going to disqualify ourselves and we're just going to provide backup. And then who's in the house when the key?
I believe equipment as needed was the words used.
Yeah, there's a million layers to it. Part of the problem is on either side of this issue, if you focus on one layer too much, it's almost like people assume, oh, well, that's what I'm basing my argument on, is this one thin layer, when, admittedly, that's a huge first layer. Yeah. DNA on the hood latch, blood in the car matches the defendant. And you got this layer of improper pretrial publicity and Should we change the venue? Which jury should we have? I mean, just it's a it's a very convoluted case. The state's case with those pieces is pretty compelling, and then I think Eric Jose said, he started off, Brendan, it's an outrage, Stephen, maybe not so much. And then, you dig more and more into it, and that changes a lot of people's opinions, and sometimes not. But I forgot about there's the whole thing on the groin swabs that were never argued. A lot of things, a lot of pieces of puzzle.
Yep, certainly.
Well, I mean, I don't understand what's the question. Is the question? I think we kind of covered this last time out about the groin swabs.
I wasn't there. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were aware of that. I apologize.
No, but I'm. On what basis is anyone saying that the groin swabs have anything to do with anything? Or are you just talking about the fact that they were collected?
The groin swabs are what Zellner has basically posited as worse. Because if you read her motion where she talks about, it's basically her original motion for post-conviction relief, or petition for post-conviction relief. In there, she talks about what went down with the DNA and her expert and what he determined. And what they say is that it's very plausible to think that if they had an extra swab from somewhere, that the method here wouldn't have been to plant DNA on the hood latch. The method would have been to just swap the hood latch swab with the one they knew had Stephen Avery's and just relabel it. And so her expert is his whole reasoning is that that's the easier way to do it, is to just relabel a swab and voila, that's it. Now the hood latch swab has a ton of DNA on it. Explaining why we would end up with nearly 2 full nanograms.
And not have it come back positive for blood. Because
or
remember
any other bodily fluid.
Right.
I mean,
I just brought it up, not really as a question, and I didn't know you already had discussed it. It's just that, it's just one more layer, and you have handled a lot of cases over my career, and you do have coincidences, and you do have funny, strange things, but
for me, in this case, it's the accumulation.
I'd say it's just 100-fold greater in Stephen Avery's case with the evidence that having contaminated controls, just all these different things where
that bullet was also literally the last piece of evidence that she had to test. It was literally the last piece, and it comes up positive for Teresa. I mean, that's another thing that just makes it look strange.
Yeah, it came up positive. I mean, so I mean, that's the thing. It's like, for me, someone else proved to me, that someone has to, someone has to show me how it was planted or how it was manipulated or manufactured. And so far, everything I've heard, everybody that's tried to tell me that a piece of evidence was planted or manufactured or whatever, there's been an explanation for why it was found the way it was found. And that's the thing. It's like once we start getting into it and you're talking about like 20 things or 30 things, it's like, to me, to someone, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's a guilter mentality, but I guess
I was about to say that.
Yeah, it probably
I was gonna
is.
say, hey, Falcon,
We
I
ask
hope you
juries.
keep looking into the case because you're going to be a beautiful, beautiful guilter to give us that opposite side on this channel because that's where you're headed. I could tell. You just have that mindset to think that way. I personally can't. I personally can't accept the explanations I'm hearing. I don't judge you for accepting them, but I personally can't.
let me say something real quick before Gary responds. In jury selection, we ask this a bunch of different ways, but if you ask somebody, are you pro prosecution, pro police, they'll never answer you. They just don't feel they can give an honest answer. So you ask questions. Scaled questions are the best. It's called the Colorado method. But there was another question we'd asked before Colorado method came around, and it's, you think it's better for have the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof on the state such that it's better for society to have 9 guilty people go free rather than to convict one innocent person? Or do you think it's better that it's better for society if 9 innocent people go to prison in order to avoid letting one guilty person go free? People will answer that. And, if you're honest with yourself about it, that's how people filter things. And people that don't see the possibility of doubt, or that all of these coincidences, all of these we've just talked about it. They're admitted errors, critical errors in testing, evidence collection.
Happens in every investigation.
Well, it does, but 2 or 3. We're talking over 100 incidents of problem. Oh, easily.
Are you?
Every time I go and look at something, I go and look at FL, and then they measure the thing wrong, and then FK, it's measured wrong. Descriptions, it's just over and over and over again, which you'd think, since OJ, and it really changed after OJ. The professionalism of laboratories and evidence collection and, just skyrocketed the professionalism. And it's not like these people were living in the ancient past. They had all of the things in place to prevent all of this. They set out to do specific things. The search on the first and the second, it was all put in place. They knew that the theory was planning of evidence prior to that. And so they put in all of these safeguards to avoid that argument from being able to be raised. And yet there are mismeasurements in the placement of evidence. You got DNA, you got Kratz saying to the jury in opening statement, she was shot in the head at least twice. And how do we know that? Because we got 2 bullet fragments in the garage. The FK was in plain sight, should have been seen during the November search. There was tremendous amount of testimony about it, that officer, and they said you were looking carefully. You found shell casings, but yet you didn't find. It's not 2 or 3. It's not 2 or 3. 100 might be an exaggeration. My last count, was 80 serious mistakes, misentries, just on and on. But but my basic premise is if And it's fine. Some people are of the mentality that it's better that 9 guilty people go free rather than convict one innocent man. And they're probably on the he's not guilty, or at least he didn't receive a fair trial side. There are people, perfectly common sense, decent people, that feel that it's better for 9 innocent people to go to prison than let one guilty person capable of doing
one
this
innocent person going as well. Right.
Yeah, and those folks are probably on the guilter side, and nothing's going to change their mind. And then there's a bunch of room in the middle.
Oh, certainly.
Well, okay, but that I was going to say for me that's not the question for me. Is like whether it's better to let 10 guilty people off or whatever. I mean, to me it's more like when you talk about the 100 things that are odd about this case, it's like I kind of look at it this way. I don't have a lot of experience with this case in particular, but I've argued against truthers on a lot of different issues. 9/11, USS Liberty, a lot of historical issues. So this is just, to me, this case is kind of another truther issue. It's a different kind of truther issue because I believe the nature of the truthers in this issue are different from it insofar as where they're coming from and the outrage that they feel over the notion that an innocent man has been put in prison. But to me, the mentality is kind of the same. And that's this. It's like what I run into often is there's this idea that you have these 100 bits of information and you throw them up against the wall. And the truther mentality I encounter is this. It's like if even half of what we throw against the wall sticks, then that warrants a new investigation. And that means we need to relook at this entire case. And, like if any of it's sticking to the wall at all. And I think we're guilters maybe, and people like me, a guilter, tend to look at it is if half of it's falling off the wall, then that makes me kind of look at all of it and question it and go, well, wait a minute. It's like going back to.
Well, I would argue that we're looking at. Okay, so so hold on a second. So I would say that you're equating that the guilter mentality of Steven Avery's guilt to against like what Kathleen Zellner is trying to say happened, and you're saying that if 50% of hers is falling off, right, then it makes you question the entirety, right? Am I getting you correctly?
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
so you understand that we're looking at the prosecution the same exact way, right? Exactly the same way. We're looking at the prosecution going, 50% of their stuff is falling off the wall, and it's making us question.
That was exactly what I was going to say. You jumped in. I had the exact same thought, though.
Yeah, but I mean, but I was told, like I said, I don't mean to not to harp on.
I'm just saying. I mean, when you said that was the first thing that occurred to me. I was just like, we feel the same way.
but okay, but it's like, but Laura, it's kind of like what qualifies as falling off the wall is you don't believe that a finger.
We don't agree with you either, though. So
you don't believe that a blood or a finger with blood on it could leave the mark that it left on the raft.
Because it can't.
So you don't really. I don't think you can really say one way or the other. It just did in this case.
It can't physically leave a mark like that. It just can't.
How do you know that?
Because I know that.
Because you know that?
Because I know that. It's obvious.
Okay.
We'll have to do some. We'll have to. Hey, Travis, when are you going to be sending me that blood?
Like when a truther says to me, when a truther puts that question to me, like Joseph did last week, not to harp on this too much, but he kind of beat me up over that about.
He kind of did. I am sorry about that, Falcon. I want to apologize for that. But see, that's the kind of thing that truthers talk about. Like, okay, what about the sketch that was traced?
That's the thing that's sticking to the wall. And it's like, wait a minute, let me look at it again. And I look at it and it's like, no, it's not sticking to the wall. And it's like, it makes me kind of question, like, okay, if that's what you're using as the basis of, something that points to Avery's innocence.
Right. He chose the wrong term. He kind of, I mean, I totally get where you're coming from. I totally do.
If that's what you're saying, if that's one of the examples I'm being shown, then it makes me, and then you say, and Falcon, we have 100 other things just like this. It makes me kind of go, really? You have 100 other things just like this?
That's not what I'm saying.
I will also say, Falcon, I'm not trying to convince you right now. I'm willing to wait for you to also dig in more and come up with some of your own ideas that you got from looking at the evidence yourself. I'm not trying to convince you right here and now. I hope we have your other side point of view for maybe quite a while. Certainly I'm not trying to turn you on a spot or anything like that. So just to kind of be clear on that.
No, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't have any hope of convincing anybody else on this panel to my way of thinking. I know you guys, you've looked at the evidence and you think what you think, and based on that, I'll give you that the basis of your conclusion is the evidence as you understand it and as you've studied it. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying that like I said, I guess what I'm trying to do, if nothing else we can get out of this kind of interaction is for you to understand where for me to understand where truthers are coming from, and for you to understand where guilders are coming from. We may not ever agree on the implications of the evidence itself, but I'm just kind of like, I'm telling you why I think the way I think. That's why, and that's the mentality that I'm coming from. Like,
that's exactly what I felt.
Said, I don't want to get into 9/11 or things like that, but I'm just saying, I've run into the same kind of thing in those types of discussions where people will they'll throw so many things at me, so many bits of evidence that they think are convincing, that when I look at one at a time, and I know Laura's going to jump on this.
Let me say something really quick about one at a time. See, that's in a conversation like this, it's interesting and fun and entertaining. I think there's group types of people that are interested in cases like this. People that like to that are interested in the true crime genre. They follow all of the cases that fit a national profile just because they like books on the subject, they're interested in it. And then I think there's a group of people that are motivated by a sense of unjustness or unfairness, and then there's people like me that look at it from the legal perspective. But in law, in court, there are a lot of things that we don't look at one piece at a time. And you hear this all the time, a legal standard. It's called the totality of the circumstances.
Right.
You'll see that in Zellner's brief. A lot of things she'll talk about. The standard for this is it's a totality of the circumstances, because the reason why is, if you segment everything and pull out and look at it piece by piece, there's an explanation. But the law's figured out, legally you can pick apart anything. But at some point, there are so many little things that you might be able to refute each one individually, but collectively rise to a level that makes them uncomfortable with a jury's decision. Right. And it becomes a legal consequence. But I said earlier in the chat, it's not a debate contest, and then Laura challenged me to a debate anytime. What I meant by that is that in terms of the law side of it, and this brief that's coming up due December 20th, and the way the courts have to look at this, and what she's going to argue, and what's going to have to be responded to by the state. It's a whole different type of thing. It's not debate team. It's not one point in our column, and try and rack up points so that we can win the debate contest. It's you got two sides of the argument. They're arguing the facts that support their position, and then you have judges who are influenced by politics. And then it's complicated. Even if they're appointed lifetime appointments, they have to look at their decisions. What type of effect is this going to have on future cases? But it's just a whole different perspective at looking at it. And when I said, close to 100 serious problems, I didn't mean 100 like this. I mean, it's there's 100 errors. People can debate how big an error they are, and but there's just no question they're errors. That it's noted that a bullet fragment's found 6 feet north of the southern wall, and then that's 12 feet. And then that's changed to 12 inches. I mean, they wrote memos about it correcting themselves. It's a bunch of little stuff like that. And what my point is everybody, whether they intend it or not, whether they want to believe it or not, everybody looks at facts through filters. And it's just the biases and prejudice that we have. And I'm not talking about race or, religion or, the most vile kind of prejudice there is, but we grow up having biases and prejudices. Yeah. It may come out in the way that we view certain people in the Avery family. It may come out in, ways we look at the prosecutors or some of the attorneys, but everybody has built-in biases and prejudices, and you look at everything through a filter. That's why the most important part of any trial, including this one, is the jury selection process. And at some point, I hope, we can take some of that out and go through it and talk about some of the responses these people gave. And I think it would be really interesting to people, it's like, oh my gosh, how on earth could you? I mean, there's a small segment in MAM2 where they're reading, or no, it was one, where they're reading some of the jury questionnaire answers about pretrial publicity. And I don't know if you remember, but, one of the responses was, this guy's totally guilty. Why are we wasting our time?
Right.
And of course, that guy, that guy never made it to the jury. That's why you do a questionnaire. But, I mean, he just wasn't even hiding the fact. I prejudged this case. This is a total waste of time. I think that was an answer to the question on the questionnaire. They kind of had a catch-all was, is there anything about you that would, possibly not make you a good juror for this case? And the response was, yeah, I think the guy's totally guilty. And this is a trial is the biggest waste of time on the face of the earth. And, but it's a simple fact of life that everybody, no matter how objective you want to be, and that's what's the problem proven with sketch artists. You take the most objective sketch artist on the face of the planet you think you can find, but their built-in biases and prejudices are going to skew them to a certain way, whether it's leaning towards drawing more Asian characteristics, African American characteristics, American Indian characteristics. I mean, that's the problem with sketch artists. But I just felt, it's a really poor example, of relating to this specific case. But I like your notion, Gary, about that. Neither side may be able to convince the other, but at least you know where the other side is coming from, kind of like what Allie did in real life, face to face with that elderly lady, and or man pulled him aside and said, "Hey, what are you about?" I sincerely believe that if that's all we accomplish is know a little bit more about each other, that, this evening's been a huge success, in my view.
All right, folks. So that was some of the excerpts from over at, Purple X Cuties channel there. The live chat they had, the Google Hangout chat, while live on her channel there. So, obviously I was over there as part of it. So I took some segments of it and put it together for this video. It's a little over an hour long, or was a little over an hour long. So if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe.